Hello everybody and welcome to Insider's Guide. Today we're continuing our discussion of Lake Louise, one of the premier ski resorts in the Canadian Rockies. With Lake Louise, there's a lot to talk about, so this Insider's Guide is split into two long parts. In this part, we'll cover the large pod and the remaining backside terrain. If you haven't already, go check out part A to get some great background on Lake Louise and learn about the frontside and ptarmigan areas. So with that, let's continue an Insider's Guide to Ski Resorts, Lake Louise. Despite the subject matter of the majority of this video, we're going to start with the frontside trail map to talk about the large pod. The Larch Express bottom terminal sits right next to the ptarmigan lift's bottom. As mentioned in part A, the fastest way to get here from the front side is to ride up the Grizzly gondola and then ski down any run in the ptarmigan pod. Additionally, you can also get here from any backside run by continuing down the Pika trail. In general, the large pod doesn't stand out a ton for me. There are a few fun glades and intermediate trails, but overall this is a pretty underwhelming area in my opinion. The entire pod in general also suffers from some of the worst conditions at the resort. It's worth checking out, but not really worth prioritizing. With Larch, we'll move from Looker's left to Looker's right. Starting off with this intermediate rock garden trail, which is one of the most unique intermediate runs anywhere. The run is exactly what the name implies and offers some of the best pillows on the mountain. Lake Louise will often designate this run as a single black if conditions are more unfavorable. Most of the time, enough snow covers the rocks for them to function more as moguls than pillows. If conditions are good, this is definitely a run worth checking out. One of few in Larch. Marmot is a pretty narrow green road that I definitely wouldn't recommend if you're not a proficient beginner. Wolverine is a good place for solid intermediates to try bump skiing. Lynx is a bump run with two distinct paths. Larch Poma is the line of the previous Poma that used to service the large pod. It's now often left bumped up. The homonymously named Larch Run is a long, fantastic intermediate cruiser. 30 Goats is essentially the bumped up lower half of the Larch Poma run, and you can also get here from Marmot. I find it interesting it's a green, as in my book, any ungroomed run has to be a blue or higher. Nonetheless, beginners stay away. Lookout Chutes and Tower 12 offer the best expert tree skiing in the large pod, and can be accessed by skiing down the Larch Express lift line and then cutting skiers left into the trees. The only downside is that the coverage here is very marginal most of the time. The Larch Express lift line also suffers from similar marginal conditions and has a double fall line. The Lookout Run is the best green trail in the large pod, but is not something I'd recommend to first-timers due to its steeper than average pitch and longer than average length. I've noticed that conditions here can also get pretty thin, especially towards the end of the day. Sensing a theme yet? Cutting skiers right into the trees from Lookout is another way you can ski the Tower 12 glades. Bobcat is a bumped up run that allows you to bypass a bit of Lookout, but it's not really worth doing. Papalion Chutes is a short but fun area that offers a few options depending on how far you traverse. If you drop in early, you'll be in the heart of some trees. If you continue all the way to the boundary line, you'll find a wide open chute that can be home to some untouched snow. Unless you enjoy mental and physical torture, avoid this ski out trail at all cost. Ski out is essentially a 3-mile flat catwalk that leads back to the front side. You really shouldn't take this thing unless the ptarmigan lift has had a mechanical issue. Finally, even though it was removed from the trail map recently, no discussion of the large pod would be complete without mentioning the legendary elevator shaft run. Previously, you'd be able to hike from the top of the Larch Lift to the very top of Lapalian Mountain. From there, you'd be able to ski this steep, massive bowl all the way back to the Larch Lift. The run itself isn't very technical, just steep and long. There are a few cliffs you'll have to navigate around during your descent, so make sure to study your route. Frankly, I myself don't know a ton about why this run no longer appears on the trail map, so if there's anyone more familiar with Lake Louise, leave it in the comments below. If I had to take a guess, I would say a combination of the huge avalanche risk and the small number of people who skied it each season led to its removal. With the boundary now being redrawn just above the Larch Lift, I believe this run is now considered proper backcountry terrain and is gate accessible for those with gear and a partner, but don't quote me on any of this. Alright, it's finally time to talk about the good stuff. This is the terrain that you come to Lake Louise to ski. The backside of Lake Louise has some of the most epic terrain you'll ever ski. This terrain has a pretty variable opening schedule, but if you get here on a day when everything's open, there's no better place to be. The backside is absolutely massive, but I'll do my best to cover everything. The Paradise Chair is the second lift on the backside. This lift services so much terrain that you could spend weeks just skiing it. The ridge that the Paradise lift services is known as Eagle Ridge, or ER for short. Eagle Ridge can be broken up into 7 distinct sections, labeled ER 1 through 7. For some fantastic visuals of the Eagle Ridge terrain, I've attached a few links to a website called Lake Louise LowDown in the description. From the top of the Paradise lift, you'll have to take the corridor trail to get to any of the runs from ER 1 to ER 3. This trail is slightly uphill until you reach the top of Swedes. From here, the trail is quite narrow and often bumped out. In lower seasons, it can also be rocky in a few spots, which makes for a slow descent. ER1, or East Bowl, is at the very end of this ridge, and frankly, for the amount of vert you get, it's not worth the effort it takes to get here. Crow Bowl and 2/3 Shoulder in ER2 are better options for advanced skiers, although they're not the best advanced runs off Eagle Ridge. I slightly prefer Crow Bowl to 2/3 Shoulder since the terrain there is a bit more unique. East Bowl Trees is actually pretty fun and a bit steeper and tighter than you might expect. ER3 consists of some of the steepest terrain at Lake Louise. The entrances into all of these runs are steep and exposed, requiring you to navigate through several large boulders. The zone's namesake run, ER3, is the steepest out of all of them. Swedes is particularly rocky, so look out for your equipment here. It's also worth knowing that due to its proximity to the Paradise Lift, the ER3 zone can get quite bumped out. All the ER3 runs filter onto the Powder Pockets Trail, which can actually hold some pretty nice stashes of snow. In addition, all runs from ER1 to ER3 filter onto the Pika Trail. Pika leads you to the bottom of the Paradise Lift, and if you continue to follow it, it leads all the way down to the Ptarmigan and Larch lifts. As mentioned previously, catwalking isn't an issue on this trail, and it moves along just fine. Now we get to the ER4 terrain, which is the most popular section of Eagle Ridge. Fenceline Gully requires you to partially go up corridor. The top part of this run can hold some really nice snow since most people overlook this run for the ER3 terrain. In general, this is a great first double black to try at Lake Louise. The marquee run here is Paradise Bowl. Paradise Bowl is probably the best run in Louise's backside for advanced skiers. The bowl is extremely wide open, one of the largest I've seen at any North American ski resort. And yes, I'm also thinking of Vail right now. Yes, bigger than that. Most days it has pretty large moguls, but the snow is typically still soft enough to be enjoyable. Paradise Cornice is a very short hike from the Paradise Lift, but is a fun alternative to Paradise Bowl. The Cornice entry is typically on the smaller side, and it's not much steeper than Paradise Bowl. The lower half of Paradise Cornice is called 4/5 Shoulder, but it's essentially another section of Paradise Bowl. All the ER4 terrain filters to the same spot beneath the heart. From here you have a few options. You can ski the lift line, which is broken into two parts, known as Upper Alley and Alley. Upper Alley is only accessible from ER4 and the Paradise Lift. You can still ski Lower Alley if you're riding down the Pika Trail from either the Ptarmigan Lift or the Grizzly Gondola. I'm not too crazy about either of these runs. The most popular way down is via Hell's Kitchen, and that is exactly why I avoid it. It's a mogul run that has really poor coverage due to the sheer volume of skiers who ski it every day. My favorite option is to cut into Lower 5, which is essentially the lower half of the ER5 terrain. Lower 5 is definitely a touch steeper than your average single black diamond, but it's a whole lot of fun. There are plenty of fun little rock drops you can hit on your way down. The only downside is that the exit onto the Saddleback Trail is a bit uphill, which requires some catwalking. Now we talk about a zone that 99% of you watching, including myself, will probably never get the chance to ski, ER5. If you're looking for arguably the most extreme terrain at Lake Louise, this is it. Upper 5 is an absolutely insane run and is one of the most exposed I've seen at any ski resort. The most doable entrance is known as Diagonal Gully on the looker's right side of the triangular face. This area has massive cliffs, tight chutes, rocks, straight lines, and just about anything you can imagine that makes a run extreme. Both Upper Kitty's and Kitty's Corner are accessible from ER6. Upper Kitty's has a bunch of huge drops, and Kitty's Corner is essentially the lower half of the ridgeline that divides ER5 and 6. So what's the catch? Well, both Upper 5 and Upper Kitty's are literally never open since both of these runs require a ridiculous amount of snow to fill in. Upper 5 has a mythical status, even among locals who frequented Louise for decades. I think this Reddit comment sums it up perfectly. Both Lower 5 and Kitty's Corner are open much more frequently, so if you want to experience the ER5 zone, that's going to be the best way. Moving on to two zones that are open a lot more frequently, ER6 essentially consists of one run creatively named ER6. This is a fantastic run, one of the best at Louise. You get here the same way you would get to Paradise Cornice, except you drop in the opposite direction. The chute starts off narrow, with rocks creating a few distinct paths. After you clear this initial choke, it widens significantly. At the bottom, you have a few options. If you go skiers left, you'll reach Kitty's Corner. ER6 to Kitty's Corner is one of the absolute best combinations on the mountain. Kitty's Corner consists of some trees and really fun drops. If you go straight, you'll arrive at Split Rock. Split Rock is rated double black, but is really only one if you do the rock drop, which is easily avoidable for a majority of the season. Your final option is to cut skiers left towards the bottom of Wounded Knee, which brings you to Warden's Run. The final part of Eagle Ridge, ER7, contains some of the most technical but accessible extremes at the resort. There is a distinct rock band that separates ER6 and 7. Big 7 is an epic run and a great place to start in this area. The entry is typically steep and corniced, and the run is guarded by that rock band on the skier's right, giving it a distinct look. A bit further down Saddleback is Dropout, which is slightly less steep than Big 7, but has more rocks to avoid at the top. Vertical Cornice is probably the most technical of these three chutes, with a cornice entry between two rocks. The remaining runs, Couloir, Pato's Pitch, The Beast, and Jackpot, are all pretty similar and tough to differentiate between. All of them start off deceptively easy, but each has a very tight choke in the middle. With ER7, in general, the runs get less steep but more technical, from lookers left to right. It's worth knowing that these final 4 runs are all technically accessible from top of the world. The iconic Saddleback Trail is essentially a green road that allows beginners to ski through Louise's backside. It starts from the top of the Paradise Lift, goes past the top of the World Lift, around the ER6 and 7 zones, and continues all the way to the bottom of the Paradise Chair. So if you're coming from the front side, Glacier Express to top of the world to Saddleback is the fastest way to get to the bottom of the Paradise Lift. I would only recommend this trail for experienced beginners since it's quite narrow. This trail also flattens out a good bit towards the bottom. It's doable for skiers, but definitely annoying for snowboarders, so try to maintain your speed as much as possible. I also recommend taking Warden's Run as opposed to the lower half of Saddleback since it's a bit steeper, which helps with speed retention. Reed's Way allows you to skip the Saddleback Road without committing to the ER7 lines. Saddleback Bowl is a small intermediate bowl that's typically left ungroomed and can be a fun alternative to Saddleback. Wounded Knee is a great starter double black diamond at Lake Louise. It's a bit narrow, but is pretty short and low consequence. From Wounded Knee, you can either head back towards the Saddleback Trail, or, with a bit of effort, head skiers right towards Split Rock. Finally, this Hourglass Trail is a gnarly one. Not too many people know about it, but you can get here from Saddleback. This is another trail where I have no idea how it's rated single black. It's extremely steep and, in most conditions, mandates straight line. Now, it's finally time to talk about the iconic backside terrain off Whitehorn Mountain, serviced by the Summit Lift. All this terrain requires you to ride up both the Paradise Lift and the Summit Lift to lap. This terrain can essentially be broken down into 5 zones: Whitehorn 1, Whitehorn 2 and 3, Boomerang Bowl, Brown Cow, and North Cornice. FYI, Whitehorn 1, 2, and 3 are the official avalanche control names for these zones off Whitehorn Mountain. Just like the rest of the guide, we'll go from left to right. I've also attached a few additional Lake Louise LowDown links of this terrain in the description. Check out their visuals if you plan to ski this terrain. Let's start with Whitehorn 1, also known as Whitehorn Bowl. This is another area that I'm shocked is rated single black. This terrain is equally as steep and exposed as the neighboring Whitehorn 2 terrain and definitely deserves a double black rating in my book. This terrain is accessed through a series of 4 gates, and the runs accessible through each gate are named after the gate you enter. In general, the lower the gate number, the harder and longer the run. 4th gate is the shortest and easiest, while 1st gate is the longest and most challenging. If I could only recommend one gate, I'd definitely recommend the 1st gate. Ridge Run and Rodney's Ridge are slightly easier alternatives to the 1st gate run. The Whitehorn 1 terrain can be extremely rocky in the early season, so this is another place to be mindful of your equipment. One last thing to note is that if you cut over skiers right towards Skyline at the right time, it is possible to lap the Whitehorn 1 terrain using just the Summit Lift, although you do lose a bit of vert in the process. If I could only recommend one terrain zone at Lake Louise, it's the Whitehorn 2 terrain. This zone has several names, those including Whitehorn 2, the Alphabet Gullies, and the Ultimate Steeps. This terrain is Lake Louise's claim to fame, and why the resort has such a profound reputation for extremes. As the name implies, the Alphabet Gullies are a series of epic couloirs, labeled A through I. Gullies A through H are part of Whitehorn 2, and I Gully is part of Whitehorn 3. In general, the terrain here gets more challenging from lookers left to right. A and B Gully, known as Adrenaline and Bighorn respectively, are the 2 least distinctive gullies in the Ultimate Steeps. They're both accessed by skiing down Ridge Run and then cutting skiers left. Both don't really stand out all that much and are not really worth doing over their more impressive neighbors. C Gully, or Chimney, is accessed directly off the Summit Lift, no further catwalking required. It's slightly mellower than the next few gullies, making it a good place to start in the Ultimate Steeps outside of A and B Gullies. There are a few minor rocks and cliffs in the chute, however, they're pretty easy to avoid. The only minor downside with C Gully is because it's accessible right off the lift, it tends to get skied out pretty quick. The best runs in this zone, in my opinion, are the gullies D, E, and F due to their sustained pitch, lengthy vert, and distinctive profiles. D Gully, or Devil's Thumb, is essentially a harder version of C Gully with a few more rocks to ski through. If I could only recommend one gully for you to try, it would be E Gully, or Exit Only, as it's by far the most aesthetic of all the chutes. F Gully, or Freefall, is very similar to E Gully, just not as prominent. It's a very similar story when it comes to G Gully, or Gravity Pull. H Gully, or Highline, is usually exceptionally rocky and has lots of great cliffs to drop. In addition, there are a lot of fantastic cliffs and spines in between H and I Gully. Now, we get to a particularly interesting run with I Gully, or Insanity. I Gully is the only chute that's part of the Whitehorn 3 zone that's skiable. I Gully is hardly open, but when it is, it's one of the gnarliest lines on the mountain. The run is exceptionally steep and narrow and difficult to find. It needs a ton of snow to fill in, so don't expect it to be open during your visit. It's also worth knowing that H and I Gully both open and close together. The rest of the Whitehorn 3 terrain lookers right of I Gully is permanently closed, so please don't attempt any lines here. Finally, for some additional challenge, the rocky ridges and spines that separate the gullies offer much spicier descents than the gullies themselves. Moving on to the terrain in Boomerang Bowl. This is the mellowest zone in the summit backside, but is definitely still worth checking out. The main run here is, of course, Boomerang. Boomerang is one of the most unique intermediate runs at Lake Louise. The top part is ultra flat, but the rest of the run is wide open, especially once it turns this corner. Boomerang can be groomed in the later season, but in most cases it's left ungroomed. Even when it's groomed, it's often an extremely narrow strip, and thus I can only recommend this run for experienced intermediates. There are snow fences towards the top of Boomerang along the ridge, so be careful to regulate your speed. At least during lower snow years, the bottom half of Boomerang can have a few short rocky chutes that can be fun to straight line. Make sure to pick up some speed towards the end of Boomerang since the last part is exceptionally flat. This is definitely a tough run for me to recommend to snowboarders due to the start and egress. In addition, you can also do a brief hike to access the upper part of Boomerang. This run isn't that much steeper than Boomerang, but it can hold some great snow. The hike is steep, but not very long. Little Pipestone is essentially part of the same bowl as Boomerang, but is slightly steeper and less traveled than the main run. Shoulder Roll is essentially the ridge that separates Boomerang Bowl and the Brown Cow area. Speaking of which, let's talk about the Brown Cow Zone, formerly known as the Brown Shirt Zone. The easiest run here is Brown Cow, which can be accessed by traversing a bit more skiers left from Shoulder Roll. This run is fun, but the cooler lines require a bit of hiking. If you continue along the same hike that you took to access Upper Boomerang, you'll come to Brown Cow first, a steep chute that is often home to some excellent snow and some particularly nasty sharks. Although it's great, the run I recommend the most is its neighbor, Brown Cow Main. This is a very steep couloir that many overlook due to its location. If it's open, it's 100% worth doing. Let's now shift gears to the North Cornice and Boundary Bowl terrain, which is some of the most remote at the resort. Some of this terrain takes a lot of effort to get to, and while I can't recommend lapping it, it is worth checking out for its often fantastic snow quality. UNC, or Upper North Cornice, is the ridge that separates Brown Cow Main and Boundary Bowl. It filters down into the North Cornice proper, which consists of 3 runs: Wild Goalie, Ghostly Goalie, and Lake Pitch. These chutes are short, but really fun with their cornice drop-ins and rocky profiles. Finally, we get to Boundary Bowl, which is a massive area that's often loaded with great snow. It's an absolute pain to get to, but if you're committed to finding some freshies, this is the place to look. Alright, that about wraps it up for Lake Louise. If you haven't already, go check out Part A to hear about the rest of Lake Louise. Or, go check out another episode of Insider's Guide, all about other fine resorts around the West. As always, please leave any questions down below. Thank you all so much for watching, especially if you stuck out this long one all the way till the end. All my love, I'm out.